Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill announce a formal congressional investigation into the inexplicable skyrocketing wealth of Representative Ilhan Omar. The Pentagon prepares to deploy 1,500 active duty soldiers to Minnesota, and all to restore order to the growing and potentially violent demonstrations which are tearing apart the Minneapolis area, as we all know. And hotels throughout the Twin Cities are reportedly kicking out ICE agents and closing their doors to visitors as tension escalates between federal authorities and out-of-control protesters. Also, we'll tell you why Iran is now threatening to unleash full-scale war on the U.S. And if you have some old VHS tapes lying around the house, you might just be sitting on a gold mine without even knowing it. All this and a bunch more is coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with this. Completely fed up with Ilhan Omar and her inflammatory rhetoric, lawmakers in Congress are now preparing to launch a significant probe into her mysterious and shocking increase in personal net worth. Yeah, how'd that happen? According to reports, the prestigious House Oversight Committee is currently turning up the heat on Omar, and in a big way. And Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky, he now promises that sooner or later, either his group or the House Ethics Committee is going to catch up with the Minnesota Congresswoman, get to the bottom of the matter, and find out the exact truth about where all of her reported $30 million came from. Furthermore, Comer says his team is now actively consulting with their own lawyers about the possibility of taking a surprising first step in the investigation by issuing a legally binding subpoena to Omar's wheeler-dealer husband, that guy, Tim Minette. Brother Minette, come on down. Let's have a chat. The committee chairman says, to begin with, there are a whole bunch of questions about how Omar's hubby managed to suddenly accumulate so much wealth over the past couple of years after previously being worth pretty much next to nothing. Yeah, tell us how you do that. He goes on to argue that as a money guy, he knows it's simply not possible for that kind of wealth to inexplicably sprout up overnight, especially when the companies in question have no apparent source of legitimate revenue. Additionally, federal law enforcement officials now confirm they're actively investigating all the politicians who are associated in any way with Minnesota's staggering $9 billion fraud scandal. Yeah, including the congresswoman in whose district most of the Somali social welfare schemes took place. I'm not allowed to mention her name, but I can tell you this. It rhymes with Ilhan Omar. Minnesota Republican Representative Tom Emmer says the widening scope of the probe into Omar is long overdue. Says that, at the very least, the House Ethics Committee has a duty to investigate the Congresswoman because while taxpayers were getting fleeced by Somali fraudsters, both she and her husband were raking in millions all through their shady business ventures. Now, President Trump, he's taking it just a little bit further, now calling Omar a constant complainer who hates America, adding that she knows everything there is to know about the billions in her state's fraud. He also says she should be in jail, or even worse, sent back to her birth country of Somalia, where she can help, quote, make Somalia great again. Now, for her part, Omar is fighting back the only way she can by using inappropriate language to insult the Trump administration, ICE, and the USA itself. Says that she and her fellow immigrants fought to escape countries where this kind of appalling conduct takes place, that they never thought they'd have to experience it ever again, and that we should all be ashamed that it's happening right here in America. She said that, did she? Well, bless her little heart. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, here's the deal. Almost 100% of the time, those get-rich-quick schemes are just that, schemes. Nobody really gets rich, and somebody always ends up getting duped. But this time, one person, Congress gal Ilhan Omar, and her spouse, that'd be husband number 3, they break the mold and go from rags to riches seemingly overnight. And Republicans are calling foul. I'll tell you, I don't like that one bit. This whole thing strikes me as just mean-spirited, partisan politicking. And I say there's a perfectly good explanation for the couple's newfound wealth. Look, they had a winery, and maybe they were selling Chianti for $50,000 per bottle. Maybe her husband, that Tim Minette fella, maybe he operated an investment firm that charged clients tens of thousands of dollars per hour for that top-notch financial advice. Also, it's never happened before, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I wonder if editor Pranov the Magnificent, has a picture of one of these things. Maybe they planted some money trees in their backyard, and the trees grew some of those brand new, crisp $100 bills every day. That can really add up. Just because she's representing the 5th District in a state which is being investigated for billions of dollars worth of fraud, and she now magically has $30 million in the bank, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's done something wrong. So you go right ahead. You issue that subpoena to Ms. Omar's current hubby, and I'm sure he's got a perfectly good explanation regarding the couple's newfound wealth. Turning our attention now to President Trump's increasing possibility of invoking the Insurrection Act in order to clamp down on the unruly protests and anti-ICE demonstrations which continue to plague Minneapolis. According to administration officials, the Pentagon has already sounded the alarm and ordered nearly 1,500 active duty soldiers to stand by and prepare to deploy to Minnesota if the violence, which is currently rocking the streets, gets any worse. The officials say that right now those troops are presently stationed in Alaska, that they're specially trained to operate in cold weather conditions, and that is still very much up in the air whether or not they'll wind up flying to the rescue in the land of 10,000 lakes. For now, the situation on the ground in the Twin Cities, it seems to be continuing its rapid downward spiral following the recent tragic shooting of anti-ICE activist Renee Good. The Trump administration has already flooded the area with thousands of immigration agents and Border Patrol officers, and increasingly frequent encounters there now taking place between those officials and other anti-ICE protesters. Meanwhile, some of those clashes are reportedly turning violent, and over the weekend, a number of out-of-control protesters actually stormed a local church and shamefully disrupted an ongoing service, and this in order to call attention to the fact that one of their pastors allegedly also works for ICE. For his part, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey warns that any military deployment to his city would only fan the flames and make things even worse. Says they don't need any more federal agents to keep people safe because they were already safe in the first place. Well, not exactly. Before any of them got there. We'll talk about that a little bit more coming up. In the meantime, the Justice Department now reportedly investigating both Mayor Frey and Governor Tim Walz. That's for conspiracy to obstruct law enforcement. They accuse them of blocking ICE from carrying out their operations to enforce our country's immigration laws. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Here's how you know when you're a complete and utter failure as a government leader. And this applies to Minnesota Governor, that guy Tim Walz, Representative Ilhan Omar as well, also Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and some others. You're an abject failure if the community that you govern is so out of control that thugs are attacking federal law enforcement officials and you support the thugs. This is how people get hurt. And as we saw very recently, as we just mentioned a moment ago, this is how people can get killed. You're an abject failure if you support chaos, rioting, crime, legendary levels of fraud, and illegal immigration over law and order. And you're most clearly an abject failure as a leader when the President of the United States has to create some kind of a plan to send active duty military personnel to your state and all to protect ICE agents and others from being targeted. For those wreaking havoc on the streets of Minneapolis, you have the right to peacefully assemble. You don't have the right to menace or attack anybody, to riot in the streets, stop the free flow of traffic, or destroy anything. For those who are taking part in the lawlessness, fine work. You're playing perfectly into the hands of the governor. His big plan, which is to deflect from fraud, crime, illegal immigration, and more in that fine state of Minnesota. He's playing you like a fiddle. All right, staying in the Twin Cities for just a bit longer now. Shift our focus to an unexpected and extremely unwelcome repercussion of the far left's radical attack on federal law enforcement officials throughout the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. According to reports, a number of high-end hotels in the region now temporarily shutting down completely, and this is due to mounting safety concerns regarding the ongoing battle between federal authorities and mobs of fanatical anti-ICE protesters. And to make matters worse, in downtown St. Paul, the DoubleTree by Hilton actually canceling the reservations of a number of federal ICE agents who were already staying there, basically just kicking them out on the streets. And a form letter slipped under the door. The hotel unexpectedly told sleeping visitors that their well-being would always be the organization's top priority. They then delivered the startling news that due to public safety concerns, the DoubleTree had made the agonizingly difficult decision to temporarily shut down. They're saying we're closed now, but come on back in a few months when things sort of settle down. And the condescending letter then goes on to claim that the company is making the move out of sincere care for all involved, that if necessary, they're willing to help people find another place to stay as well. Yeah, hopefully in another state. And in the ultimate display of arrogance, that as a gesture of goodwill, they're graciously offering to refund the cost of one night's stay. Could have at least thrown in a towel or maybe one of those continental breakfasts, something good, something useful. And so, downtown St. Paul is located just a couple of miles from the federal building in Minneapolis, where professional agitators and unruly anarchists have been clashing, and on a regular basis, with federal agents. And a similar closing notice reportedly delivered to guests at both the Holiday Inn and the Intercontinental hotels in St. Paul as well. I say go to the Motel 6 on account of they always leave the light on for you. And producer Davey, get that Tom Bodette fella on the horn when you can. Now, according to ICE, troublemaking protesters in the area, they've been intentionally targeting their agents by going from hotel to hotel and hunting for federal law enforcement officers who are bravely risking their lives to protect innocent Americans. In the meantime, ICE promises they won't be stopped from completing their mission and that no matter what, they're not going anywhere until the job is finally done. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Like Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, this guy said over the weekend, "We are safe." That's his quote. Now I'm just thinking out loud, but when he said that, and just for clarification, perhaps what he meant to say was, my city is out of control. I'm an overwhelmed, confused, feckless leader, and I don't know what to do next. I think that's what he meant to say, but maybe the words just didn't seem to roll off his tongue in the right order. Hey, here's the real deal. The city is so unsafe that hotels, as we just mentioned, they're shutting down. Almost sounds like hotel staff and management know more about safety than this genius mayor could ever comprehend, and even on his best day. A bunch of those knucklehead agitators are even making their presence known in the local places of worship, and that's just inexcusable. The city is so unsafe that U.S. military personnel may soon be deployed to the region to shore things up and stop the punks, thugs, and cowards from harassing, threatening, and harming people in the city. Yeah, Mayor Frey, your city is safe as texting while driving, blindfolded, in rush hour, at night, and in a rainstorm. As safe as crossing the Atlantic Ocean in a leaking rowboat in the middle of winter. Mayor Frey, you're doing a great job, sir, and rock on. Stay the course. I'll change things up just a bit and take a look at shocking health reports coming out of communist China, which points to a possible side effect from the COVID-19 pandemic. That is the gift that keeps on giving. According to state media, nearly 150 million people in China now afflicted with an unusual type of nodule that's growing on their lungs. And according to one of the communist regime's top medical advisors, the staggering increase is due to the large number of people who received CT scans during the COVID-19 pandemic. Meantime, the Chinese Communist Party trying to downplay their country's new health crisis. And they say the entire affair, no big deal at all, that people are developing lumps on their lungs because they're getting more types of medical scans in general, and that, in any case, most of the nodules generally benign, and they're not going to kill you. Hey, by the way, that comes from the CCP, so it must be true. However, a number of medical experts all over the planet disagree with the communist regime entirely, and they say the Chinese citizens are getting extremely sick from their repeated exposure to filthy pollution due to the country's extraordinary high rate of long-term COVID as well, and thanks to severe problems with China's domestically produced COVID-19 vaccines. Now, a couple of additional headlines we're also keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, President Trump now calling for everyone in the former Biden administration to be placed under arrest for using Sleepy Joe's Autopen signature to approve a number of critical bills and executive orders. He's going to lock them all up. On the international front, following 47's call for a regime change in Iran, the Islamic Republic's president is now warning that any attack on his country's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, would trigger a full-scale and all-out war between our two nations. It's kind of like movie director Woody Allen challenging Mike Tyson to 5 rounds in the ring. Doesn't make much sense. And in the Middle East, the Kremlin now says that Russia's President Vladimir Putin has officially been asked to join President Trump's Board of Peace, which will oversee the next phase of the peace deal in the devastated Gaza Strip. Great idea. If there's one guy who knows a lot about peace, it's warmonger Vladimir Putin. In the meantime, a number of other countries have been asked to participate as well, with both Hungary and Vietnam already signing on. And now a quick gander at a little bit of showbiz news. And we kick things off today with a long-running late-night talk show host who's heading north of the border to tickle funny bones for the first time in nearly a half a century. Next month, comedian David Letterman set to headline a massive comedy festival in Vancouver called Just for Laughs, marking his first stand-up gig in the Great White North since he appeared on Canadian TV way back there in 1978. In my mind, he's most likely doing this because he heard that President Donald Trump is in negotiations to buy Canada, make Canada our 51st state, and maybe he's sort of kind of acting as an ambassador to help seal the deal. So thank you, Mr. Letterman, and I'm sure 47 appreciates your help as well. But hey, would it kill you to grab a shave? I was looking at a picture earlier and kind of looks like he's got that 5 o'clock shadow. Hey, moving along, if you're a fan of classic movies, and you have been for decades, you might just be sitting on a veritable fortune. According to reports, collecting old and rare VHS tapes now an extremely popular hobby, and diehard fans are apparently willing to shell out enormous bucks for the opportunity to get their hands on a number of extremely hard-to-find titles. Among the original home videos that could be worth a mint, Back to the Future, The Goonies. I love The Goonies, especially on a weekend when it's raining. First Blood as well, and a whole bunch more. The best high-quality way to watch a movie has always been, is now, and will always be on a high-quality VHS tape. And clearly, that's why they're selling for so much dough. Also, if you have a VHS copy of a legendary movie called The Complete Al, which, by the way, I have a very small part in, I'll assume that tape would net you a good $2, maybe $3 at a garage sale.
Do you think you have a chance of meeting Weird Al?
Well, I don't know, because sometimes it's all who you know anyway.
Excuse me, can you tell us what you're selling here?
Well, we have here your complete line of Al t-shirts.
Actually, now that I think about it, hold on to it. Maybe worth a pinch more someday. And in New York, a popular Game of Thrones action star who's about to hit the silver screen in a brand new flick is now weighing in on whether or not he can actually beat up his ripped co-star. And believe it or not, now says the answer, it's a resounding no. Aquaman himself, Jason Momoa, claims that if he ever got into the steel cage match with his upcoming Wrecking Crew partner and former wrestler Dave Bautista, he'd basically get his butt kicked every single time. Just because they're two big fellas, each with a background in wrestling, why does this conversation have to end up in a steel cage? Why can't this end up with the guys taking a road trip to Santa Barbara, California, where they visit some high-end antique stores and maybe sip cappuccino at an outdoor cafe? Or maybe the story could end with the fellas sipping appletinis at sunset and talking about global issues and self-reflection. On second thought, the cage is a better ending to that story. I get it now. Forget I brought any of this up. And now it is time to call it a wrap on the big news roundups. Have an awesome day. Stay safe. And if you haven't done so already, it's right there. Just hit that little subscribe button. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. Dolly Parton just celebrated a birthday. Happy 80th birthday to young Dolly Parton. With that, we'll dim the lights, fade to black, and we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Big News Roundup.